Hello, everyone. Thanks so much for joining us for our conversation about parenting teens today. My name is Faith Berens, and I'm one of the special needs consultants for HSLDA. Hey, when most of us think about parenting teens, confidence and joy probably are not the first words that come to mind. That's why I'm thrilled today to host this conversation with a friend, Connie Albers, someone I really respect and look up to so much. Connie Albers is a speaker and an author, and she is the author of Parenting Beyond the Rules. I have my copy right here. It is so marked up and highlighted and has all kinds of sticky notes in it. So Connie is the author of this Parenting Beyond the Rules, Raising Teens with Confidence and Joy. So welcome, Connie. Thank you so much for being with me.
Oh, hi, Faith. I'm so glad to be with you and your audience to talk about Parenting Beyond the Rules. Yes, I am honored to be able to call you friend, and thank you for your kind comment.
Oh, I love you so much. I consider you a mentor too to me. So I'm really excited to have the privilege of hosting this live and talking with you today because you've been a big encouragement to me with my own parenting and homeschooling. So I'm just really excited to get to chat with you today. And I know our audience is going to be so encouraged with everything that you have to share.
Well, thank you. We're going to dive in here, aren't we?
Yeah, we're going to have fun. Okay, so for everyone joining us on Facebook, we are very glad that you're here. And I'd like to invite you to drop comments as we're chatting today. Let us know where you're joining from if you'd like to do that. And then also be sure to put any questions along the way that you have for Connie during our conversation today. So put those in and we'll be sure to save time later. So let's jump in here. And first of all, Connie, I just want you to tell everybody a little bit about yourself and your family as we get started.
I'm a mother of 5. We homeschooled from kindergarten till we turned the tassel on the last child. So it took a couple decades to kind of get through that. We have 5 and 7 years, no, 8 years, and 3 are now married. So we homeschooled. They all went on to college at the same university. They all graduated, and now they're all living their life and figuring kind of like life out. So all of them live near us. I would say 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. 5 of them live like 2 minutes from our house, and the other 3 live 15 minutes from our house. So we just got back from I would say it's not a vacation, but kind of a vacation. My niece just got married, and we all, convoyed up to the mountains and celebrated her wedding. And it was really fun because it's kind of hard to get all of us together anymore, but we were all there, and they rented a house and they were all sharing a house. I would have loved to have been a fly on the wall in that house, but they all just did that. We have absolutely loved what we've done. I've had the opportunity to serve in a lot of leadership roles. I've had the opportunity to lead and serve on a large state homeschool organization, to teach leaders on strengths mastery so that they can develop teams. And that kind of started with my life prior to having children, just understanding the dynamics of how people think, feel, and behave. And it led me to sort of doing that with my own children. And I write about that in the book, Faith, about understanding the children that you have. And one of my things that I talk about is Albers in action. So for about 25 years, we were working with teens and college kids. We'd have them in our home pretty much every week doing Bible studies or just anything. Anytime there was an event or a possible reason for teens to gather or college kids to gather, they would be over at our house. And I learned a lot, Faith. I listened. I know we're going to talk about listening, but I just listened to the questions these kids were saying. I want to talk to my mom, but I can't tell my parents this because, and all those years I was taking notes, and I kind of have one of them here because I still haven't unpacked for my trip. I got in about 10 last night. And I just keep journals. And when people ask me questions, whether it's moms, how do I deal with my teen who's not listening, who's being sneaky, or my child who's I'm really struggling with, or these teens, the problems that they were facing. I wrote it all down. And it actually led, Faith, to me going before the Lord saying, what's my next assignment? I had run companies. I'd started co-ops. I was in leadership, doing a bunch of things, which is the beauty of being able to homeschool, in my opinion, is we can take on projects and we can try new endeavors as a woman, in addition to being a homeschool mom. And it just led to him saying, I want you to write a book. And I kind of thought he was funny. I thought, no, you're not talking about me. I didn't do it all perfect. You need somebody who did it perfect to be able to tell other parents how to do this. And he was like, nah, I'm going to take the imperfect and I want you to tell the story. And I want you to share your mom fails, not your children's fails, but your fails and what you learned, the lessons that you learned, because we're going to fail. I want parents to fail forward. I want them they're going to make mistakes. I want them to get back up, say they're sorry, talk to the Lord, whatever it is they need to do, and then get back on it and still be faithful. So that's how it led to Parenting Beyond the Rules. It's been out now for 2 years. And it's done very, very well. I think God knew the timing. He knew COVID was coming and he knew all the rules were going out the window anyway.
Wow. I just love to hear how God works in people and in their lives and how he uses everything that we go through if we will surrender that to him. And I just love so much of what you write about. It's real, it's authentic. I love what you said about failing forward. And I know I struggle as a mom of thinking I have to have it all together. And particularly in working and serving in the homeschool community, we do come under that, I think, that attack from ourselves of thinking I have to do everything right. I need to do it perfectly. And we can't do it alone. We need community. We need help and resources, encouragement, mentoring. And so I just have truly enjoyed your book and your workshops, hearing you speak, hearing you share from your own life experiences, what you've learned. And I've been learning so much myself and see that homeschooling is about way more than the academics. I really think God is teaching me and changing me and transforming me in the midst of homeschooling. So I just thank you so much for sharing, and thanks for telling us about a little bit about how this all came to be.
Yeah, it's a fun God story, to be honest with you. Just how he brought it all to pass. And it's actually has its own story with a totally different inspiration of motherhood as a ministry of showing up. And God isn't expecting us to get every assignment perfectly executed. He's not expecting that. If you look in Hebrews 11, you look at Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, and you look at Paul, and you look at Peter, and you look at David and Daniel, and the list just goes on. None of them did it perfectly. There were fears, there were failures, there was sin, there was, going the wrong way and doubting God and questioning him. But yet, if you really look in Hebrews 11, just spend some time reading it, Faith, you'll see God commended them. And I found that to be so encouraging to me, because he didn't look at their fears and their flaws and their failure. He looked at their faith, their commitment, their dedication, their willingness to say, okay, here I am. I'm gonna do this. It may be organized or without glitches, but God looks at our faithfulness, because we may have little faith, but we have a big God. And we have to keep reminding that he is the God that is working in and through us in this thing called homeschooling. And, that's kind of why, Faith, I start with telling people my kids all went to college. It's not a braggadocious thing. What it is to show parents academics is important. We want our children to get off the payroll. We want them to be able to do, what God has uniquely gifted them to do. Is it for every child? No, but it is for many. And I want parents to see you can homeschool not well and not for a quality education. Quality education is what they're getting in a public school, right? I want our kids to have a superior education. I want them to strive for excellence, whatever that is, whatever field or vocation that is. I want them to strive for excellence. And I want moms to strive for excellence in all that they do as well. And that's why I talk about, you can get your kids into college. You can get them in academic scholarships. But like you said it wisely, there is more to homeschooling than the academics. And you can pursue excellence academically. And at the same time, you can have them pursue things that they're interested in and develop those talents, develop those soft skills that are so needing. Because truthfully, more is learned outside of the classroom walls, than when we're doing textbooks or math worksheets.
Yes. Sorry, I dropped off there for a second. I'm having.
I wondered. I thought, oh no, she left me. Okay, everybody, let me entertain you.
But I love that you're so centered on the relationship and listening, and that's really my heart for home education, is to build those relationships. And you shared that, your kids have graduated, they've gone to college, they've graduated, they're working in fields, things that they enjoy, and they're pursuing the things that they love and they're passionate about, and how God has created them to be. And they're living close to where you are, which, that's what, like, when we raise our kids and they graduate, we want those relationships to be maintained, and our relationships change. And during the teen times, it's such a transition of learning how to shift parenting is what I've found, and releasing them more and letting them fail forward, and parenting them not out of fear and rules, but from a place of faith, and learning to become a friend, and with my daughter, a sister in the Lord. And to make that transition has been challenging and exciting and rewarding. But your book has been such an encouragement and help through that transition with my own daughter. So anyway, so in your book, you have a chapter on families operating as teams. And I really wanted you to talk about that. That's so important. So what are some ways that parents can develop a team-minded family culture? Because that's not the way that I was brought up. It's certainly not the way that my husband was brought up. It was more of an authoritarian. You do what I say. You don't ask why. You don't talk back. It wasn't a team thing. It was
obedience first.
Obedience, and that are in charge, and they basically did everything. Yes, we had chores.
Yeah.
And we had things that were expected of us, but it certainly wasn't collaborative or this team based mindset. So I'd like you to speak about that, please, and share some ideas for having this team-minded family culture, which may seem really different for many families.
Yeah, it's interesting that you say that. You think of everything that we do. We have a team around us. If you're in the workplace, you have to work with other people. You have to get to know them a little bit and know where their strengths and weaknesses are. You all have to you have to be committed to a singular, or let's say a company culture or a company policy or whatever it is that you're doing. And in your families, that's the same thing. What I've seen happen, Faith, is so many families get toward the teen years, and all those wonderful rules and the limits and the boundaries that we place to keep our homes from falling into utter chaos. That's primarily why we have those. We have to have rules. We live in a world, in a country with rules. There are limits that we exceed those limits, and there's usually a consequence. Same for boundaries. Those boundaries are usually to keep people safe and to keep the family running smoothly. But what happens as our children grow, parents that have so beautifully created this system that worked for their family when their children were at certain ages, they get stuck. They forget, I actually created this curfew. There's not a manual that says every child at 12 years old has to go to bed at this time, or every child at 15 has to get their permit, or every child at 17 has to XYZ. We create those as a family unit because it's what makes our family function well. And what I try to do is give parents permission to adjust them. As your children grow and change, we have to grow and we have to adjust. That does not mean we're getting wishy-washy or what works for, it's like, well, you did it with the first and you're not doing it with the third or fifth or 12th. You're right. Maybe your first child was more responsible than number 3. Or number 5, or maybe they were more they were more trustworthy. If their yes was yes, then you could trust that, and they wouldn't be looking for angles or loopholes. And so you do have to parent your children different according to how God has made them. And that is where a lot of parents get stuck. So what I was saying, Faith, is you and I've talked about this. I've seen so many families absolutely destroyed at the hand of unbending rules. These are the rules. If you don't follow the rules, then these are the consequences. I agree. There are natural consequences. If you lie, there's consequences. If you hurt a sibling, if you don't come home when you're supposed to and you have teenagers, there are going to be consequences. But there's a lot of areas that we can grow and change. And all you listeners that are going to be listening, even if it's on the replay, I want you to kind of maybe even write this down, Faith, if you can type it in the chat. But there's freedom in the pivot.
That's good.
It's okay for you to pivot. Just like if you get a math book and it's not working with your child, and you're like, they don't like it or I don't like it. I mean, math is still math. At the end of the day, 1 + 1 is 2. And I don't care what you try to tell me, what fuzzy math you're actually trying to apply. There are rules and ways to solve problems with mathematics. But if that particular curriculum isn't working, you change the curriculum. So if you're trying a certain approach with your child, don't beat your head against the wall. There is a certain feeling, and folks, I know you're listening. I'm not talking about you're literally beating your head against the wall, okay? But what I am saying is, if it's not working, ask the Lord. Talk to your spouse if you're married, and then talk to that child. When we talk about working as a family team, Faith, we have to remember those children are becoming young adults that are going to become adults that step out into the adult world. And there's only a few short years that we have. And if we get caught and stuck on rules and limits and boundaries and curfews and all the things, then we end up losing the heart of our child and we end up with a broken relationship. And when that happens, we don't have influence anymore. They don't want to hear what you have to say. They already know what you say, for crying out loud. They've lived with you all their life. They know what you think. They know how you believe. They know what your values are. They know what their limits are. They know all of that. What they want is they want to be heard. So when you think about having a team dynamic, look for ways that you can do things as a team. For instance, clean your house on one day. Everybody has assignment. And then here's the key. At the end, tell them, we're going to knock this out in an hour or 2 hours or whatever it is. And everybody's going to have their little sheets and we're all going to go do it. And we're going to do it with what? Excellence. We're going to do it with excellence. We're not doing it to get it done. We're doing it excellence. And there's a difference in excellence and perfectionism. Excellence just means they're doing the best that they can with the ability, the mental, the emotional, the physical ability that they have. They're doing an excellent job. And then at the end, we're going to go get ice cream, or we're going to go swim in, or we're going to go play, we're going to a movie, or whatever it is, and then do it. And if you're going to do yard work, everybody has a job to do. Somebody's going to rake, somebody's going to mow, somebody's going to pull weeds, somebody's going to, get somebody water, like the little ones are going to go, they're the runner, they're going to get somebody water or trash bags or something like that. But the kids all know we're doing this together because many hands make for light work. We have to maintain and be a good steward of that which God has given us. A home, a yard maybe, a car, cleaning the car, vacuuming it, washing it, whatever it is. Those are some tangible ways within the confines of your personal property, right? And then when you think about building a team outside of that, look for team building activities like they do in corporate America. They go on retreats. We wouldn't call them a retreat. We'd call it a vacation. but they go together, they go away together, and everybody has a responsibility. So even a vacation, somebody's in charge of making sure we have, let's just say we're going to go to the beach for a week. I live in Florida, so my brain always goes to beach, beach vacay. Somebody's going to make sure we have enough towels. Somebody's going to be gathering sunscreen. Somebody's be gathering and making lunches and making sure they're packed and snacks. And somebody's going to make sure that we have the toys that we're going to need to go to the beach. And we're going to have all of the things that we need. And everybody's collectively, and this is key, everybody is collectively working toward a common goal. The common goal is usually we want to have fun or get done so that we can go have fun, or get the job finished. The other thing we can do is plan activities like kayaking or canoeing or hiking, something that requires everyone to carry their load, because all of us will either do well or we'll all suffer. And those are important things to remember about building a team. Just like when you work, everybody has a job to do. And if somebody falls down on the job, that makes the load heavier and on everybody else. So we don't allow freeloading and we don't allow laziness, because why? We don't have to get on them. We just have to say, hey, we're a team. And if I stop doing what I'm doing, if dad stops working, if mom stops doing what she's doing, if your older siblings stop doing what they're doing, guess what? We're not going to have food. We're not going to have dinner. We're not going to have hot water because there won't be a light. We won't have electricity. Your kids' faith have to see themselves in the situation, like in that, and then how their part, whether big or small, how that plays into the overall success of the goal of working together. Does all that make sense?
It makes total sense. It's wonderful. And I think coming at it, positively, everybody has a role to play. You can tap into your kids' gifts and talents, their strengths, but really, I think the way that we communicate with our kids, being positive, being encouraging, pointing them toward excellence. As well. I'm a Christian, pointing them toward why we are operating this way, because it's God honoring, it's others honoring, pointing them toward the values that we want them to hold or pass to them. Great. I think COVID's been really hard. We've actually come off of a really hard year and a half personally as a family with our own teen, a daughter, and we've had some struggles, but God has been so faithful through it. And honestly, your book and then getting some really good counseling and learning how to better communicate and relate has been really key for our family. So I do want to share that. Your book has been really, really encouraging to us over the last year and a half. And we've been learning about listening better and letting go of being so much of rule-driven, authoritarian, more collaborative, this team approach. And you're right, each kid is different, and we do have to, we will parent differently from child to child, or have to make different decisions based on their personalities and behaviors, and has their own struggles or strengths and weaknesses. So I love these ideas that you've shared. We've been doing a lot of those types of things, going on outings, walking, hiking, playing more games together, being more intentional about our family time, and letting the kids put ideas on a piece of paper and put them in a bowl or in a jar about what are some fun things that you would envision us doing as a family, over the coming weekends or whatever. So thank you for sharing those tips and ideas.
We just have to remember they want to have a voice. And now this generation, Faith, they're more demanding to have a voice. That's one of the good and bad things that social media has brought into our lives. We are seeing our kids are talking to somebody, and I always say, why not you? Why aren't they talking to you if they're not? If that's going on in your home, I would be quick to say, find out why. They are talking to somebody. Look at their phone log, or look at how they're spending their time on conversations with other people. It's very telling. And I love how you're doing a jar with ideas. They just want to be heard. They want to know that their identity first is in Christ, but it's also within the family unit. They matter. They have a say in the matter. And that doesn't mean whatever they say goes. It just means that they want to be heard, and they want to be, Mom, why do we have to do that right now? And our first response is, well, because I said so. I'm the mom. I mean, that worked before when you were 2. It doesn't work when they're 12. They have a different opinion. And you know what, Faith? Sometimes their ideas are good ideas. Like if they say, Mom, why do we have to clean the kitchen on Saturday when we could be out going on a bike ride, when we could be out doing something fun? Stop for a minute and think, well, why do we do it? Is it more convenient for Mom? Is it, what's the reason? And then, Faith, talk to them about it. Well, when would you like to do it? How would you like to see this done? And, as your kids grow, like I have a lot of children, we changed. That's why I said there's freedom in the pivot. We changed. And some years we didn't do it all together. Some years as the kids got older, they had their things to do. They could just do them on their time frame. As long as they were done excellently and not haphazardly, then there was freedom to let them do it. And I would still work on teaching and training the younger ones to be diligent, to do a good job when I wasn't looking. And then eventually it turned to where nobody had to do it at the same day. We just all did our thing, and it was new on the same place. It became, because I'm voting on something. So that's a big motivation. If motivated kids will move mountains, Faith. And that's what we have to remember, that they want to be heard. They want to know that they fit in, that they belong to us. And if they don't carry their load, it's going to hurt all of us. So that's very important. Now, I know we were talking about listening. That kind of goes hand in hand with listening and family meetings when we're talking about team activities. Sometimes our kids aren't real happy with what we're doing. Maybe our kids are struggling with something. Maybe, I know we don't like to think this, but sometimes our kids might not like us. Sometimes they may not like, our personalities might clash with theirs, or the way we do things, even the way we think, feel, and process things will be different from them. And they'll wrestle with that and struggle with that, which is why those family meetings can be important. It is so I'll kind of segue those two together, Faith. The family meetings need to be a time where we're not pointing out everybody's faults. It's not a gripe session. It's not a what you're doing wrong, child, and how you just need to measure up and get with it and snap to it and, step it up. Or it's not a child's opportunity to tell you how bad of a parent you are. Or, if you were like Mary's mom, our relationship would be better. And then you want to, well, if you were like Johnny's sister, we would be great. I mean, nobody wants to be compared. So we're not going to get into that childlike behavior where it's a tit for tat. No, the purpose of a family meeting is to come together. The purpose of a family meeting is to share common concerns so that we can have and learn how we can solve these problems to a positive outcome. And it may take a while to do that, but you have to have some parameters around that, Faith, and you really got to focus on listening to learn. So there's 3 things that I wrote down. We listen to learn. We listen to fix, which means we're not really listening. We're just listening to enough of what they say so that we can immediately jump in, give them 3 points, and we can go about our day. That's not what our kids want. Our kids want to be heard. I heard that was the number one thing of working with kids for 25 years. Their parents didn't listen. Mm-hmm. And every time I'd ask the parents would be like, well, they won't talk to me. I'll listen, but they won't talk. So when you start asking further questions and you realize, well, they're listening long enough to tell them how to fix the problem, or to tell them what they're doing wrong in how their thinking is erroneous, or it's the breakdown, the fallacy of their argument. That's not going to make your child listen to you. I mean, it's great in theory, but if I'm going to open my mouth and tell somebody, and the minute I start talking, they already know what I'm going to say, and they tell me what I think and where it's wrong and what I need to change. Trust me, I'm not coming to you again, because you're not really listening. You have to listen in two ways, Faith. Listen to the words that they say, and then pay attention to the silent language. What aren't they saying? What is the hidden meaning behind what they're trying to communicate? Maybe they're afraid to really tell you because they do love you and they don't want to hurt your feelings. And they don't want a negative reaction, and they don't want to be grounded for 3 months and their cell phone taken away. They want to talk to you, but they want to know you're fully listening with the intent to understand. There's a big, big difference between those. Does that make sense?
It makes total sense. And I know that that's one of the big lessons that we've been learning this past year and a half, is the need to be heard, and that we were frequently listening to try to fix, to give our advice, to jump in. And it really caused a rift in the relationship with my daughter and my husband, as well as myself. And so we've been learning and unlearning, and sometimes you have to go around. Let me take you around this barn one more time and learn this lesson. But we want healthy, good relationships, and so this is really helpful. I know that, we've had those types of family meetings where it's been more of, let's point out what's not working here and what's making us angry, and the gripe session. And so, sometimes parents, it can be helpful even to just have like samples of leading questions, how to have meaningful conversations. And that's another reason why I love your book, because there's lots of very practical tips and hacks that, how to have meaningful conversation starters with kids. And I love what you said. If they're not talking to you, why not? Because they are talking to someone else. And we found that to be true with some scary situation, and I won't go into any details, but with one of our kids. So they are talking, they are connected, social media, and you want them talking to you. You want to be that safe harbor. You want to have that relationship. So your advice and any hacks and guides even for conversations to have those family meetings and how to be a better listener. Those are really helpful and needed. So
we
share
just can't
ideas.
Yeah, we just can't assume we know what's going on in their mind. And sometimes we do. We know our kids. We know them many times better than they know themselves. But as they're growing and changing, we don't always know what the words that we're saying. We don't always know where they're landing in their tender little heart. Because it's just like you and I. We can say something like, I have these earbuds in my ear, so I'm hearing something. But what goes in to my ears and what I hear, it's not always the same. That happens in marriage, that happens in business, that happens in church and women's ministry, and it happens with our kids. I will never forget, my daughter and I were in the car, and she is an external processor. And I am an extrovert. She is an introvert. Like all of my family is an introvert except me and my youngest son. So we were driving one time, and she always needs to externally process. So driving is a great way, usually for her to explain what's going on. And I remember this time, and I wrote about it in the book. And it was the perfect example. Here we are driving, and she's sharing something heavy that she's dealing with. And she trusts me. I'd say, Mom and Dad, if your kids are going there, that means they trust you. And when your children start to be vulnerable, that is an honored, sacred place to be on the receiving end of them opening up. Because I tell you, if you misstep, that door slamming shut, and they're going to change the combination. And they won't share with you because they can't trust you with that stuff that could actually hurt them. So she was driving, and I love to ask questions. It's kind of like what you always learn, ask questions to get more details. So I'm trying to do what I'm doing and asking questions, and all of it. I mean, I'm like, oh, well, then what did you do? And I, like you and I, Faith, we would just be having a conversation. I could interject and say, hey, Faith, what did you do when this happened? Oh, blah, 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 blah. And then you talk for a while and they say, well, how did they react? Blah, 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 blah. We would have this back and forth conversation. We're grown-ups. We're adults. We understand that ebb and flow. There's not an authority situation there. We're friends. Now, with our kids, there is this authority situation. You are mom. You are all-knowing. You are also the one that can take away every freedom they have for the rest of their days of living at home. So we think, until we realize, oh no, we can't. That was a facade. But when we think about that, she was driving, and all I was doing was asking questions. She just blurted out. She'd never done this before. She just blurted out, Mom, stop. And I was so shocked. And I said, stop what? And she goes, stop interrupting me. I was so surprised. I'm like, sweetie, you know how we always flower our words. Sweetie, I'm not interrupting you. I'm just trying to have a conversation. I'm trying to get more details. She goes, no, you're not. You're interrupting me. And every time you do that, I lose my train of thought. Who knew? That was so frustrating for her. But I learned a lot that day. I learned that with each child, you have to enter that sacred space, that private space where they get real and raw and vulnerable, and they trust you enough to be talking about what's really, really going on. You have to become a master of listening to that child. Because how I speak to another child, they love the back and forth stuff. Because for them, it just, oh yeah, that detail. Oh yeah, that detail. But not for everyone. And there really is an art to asking the right questions, Faith. Ask leading questions, not yes or no. Did you have fun? Yes. Was the party good? No. That doesn't work. That works for like never. I mean, if we want to have an engaging conversation, Faith, one of the most important things I usually tell parents is start asking them about their friends. So how did your friend do on their such and such? What's going on with that your friends? She was having some struggle, I think you mentioned, with one of her friends basically embarrassed her. Get some of the details. You don't have to have them all. And say, what ended up happening there? They'll talk about what's going on with their friends. Usually there comes a point where they get a little more quiet about it, but they'll tell you and then say, oh, well, I bet you probably gave them some really good advice, didn't you? What did you say? Again, what are you communicating? I care about you enough to talk about your friends. And when they see, oh, you're actually asking about my friend, the people that are the most important people in the whole wide world at certain ages, then that must mean you really care about me. And then you could say, how did that impact you? That must have been really hard for you, wasn't it? Do you see what I did? I now segued from one place right back to what was going on in our child's heart. And you learn to do that. Some of it's by trial and error, but some of it is always just asking the things around the heart. Never start at the heart of the issue, and gently walk into that or lead them into that. But never demand, because you can't demand that they open up to you. They're just going to get quieter and more clammed up. But if you go to the why are they closed up to me? And you really honestly ask them, most of the time they'll tell you, but they're not going to remind you every other conversation. It's going to be, you got to pay attention, write it down, and then really work on practicing it. And if you blow it, then just go and say, you know what? We talked about this and I was working on it. I'm so sorry. Can we try again? Your kid's like, what? Sure. Absolutely. Let's try again. And that's the beauty and the ebb and flow of this whole building a relationship with your teens during the teen years.
Absolutely. Such great advice and wisdom. I've just learned so much from you. You write in your book, I have it marked up and starred. Don't expect your teen to just jump into a deep conversation. They may have to test the waters a little, especially if you've been a little preoccupied. Try asking leading questions that require the more than one word answers. How's your friend doing with? What happened at? Blah, blah, blah. What are you going to do about this certain issue? I love that. I love the conversation starters that you have provided, and those have been really key, because I do the same thing. I interrupt and interject a lot, and I ask a lot of questions, and that was really causing frustration with my daughter and our relationship, as she felt like I was jumping in or trying to fix things or not really listening to her heart. So,
and you know, Faith, I want to say something that parents, you know, we may do all those things. You know, you may be reading the book and go, but I am doing that. I am doing that. But it's still not, it's just not right. The one thing you can always do, always, is pray and say, God, reveal to me what I could try, how I can reach out. Help me, Lord, to just be quiet and be a student of my child. Help me to listen to what they're saying without responding, and tuck that away. And then later you can come back to it in a week or a month and say, you know, we were having a conversation once and I heard you say such and such about this person, or how you were feeling, or how mad you got at somebody because they were doing something that hurt you. How are you doing with that? Did that situation ever get worked out? The fact that they know you remember, but you haven't badgered them and questioned them and tried to fix it, it shows them that you are now trusting them to learn. You're trusting them to start navigating the adult scenarios that happen in their life. And that's really what it's all about. So going back to freedom to pivot, when there is freedom in the pivot, when we need to adjust and we need to try a different listen or interject with that have, maybe we had to have conversations that were painful to hear. They were painful to walk through. Not everybody is going to have those conversations, but I promise you this, all of us have had to have awkward, uncomfortable, difficult, conflicting conflict resolution questions, even if you have the easiest of children, because they're going to thrash around. They're going to struggle. They're going to make poor decisions. They're going to listen to the wrong person and maybe do something stupid that they can't do. And kids are keenly aware, Faith, of what's going on in the culture. They know that one word can land them in deep trouble. I think of I know people. There's a show called American Idol. It's about singing, discovering singing talents. And this one gentleman, he was a young kid. I think he was like 16-ish. He was in the top 10. And this is the most sobering reality of what our kids are facing, Faith. And that is something that they did as a child. Now, to me, 16 is a kid, right? But he was a couple years younger and he did something and he was imitating a movie scene that he saw with his buddies. I don't know all the details, but anyway, it was deemed not appropriate by, certain political sectors. And he actually got removed from the top 10 of American Idol. Now, I'm not saying what he did is right. I didn't see it. I just read a caption of that story, and I could give you story after story. The high school cheerleader who got a scholarship, and because she used social media to kind of vent, she ended up not only losing her scholarship, but she lost her place on the cheer squad, and she lost her college scholarship. Our kids are aware of what's happening. And as a mom and dad, you want to protect them from all of that. You want to keep them safe as they navigate these years that can get them in so much trouble because their brains aren't fully developed. This is why having those conversations, this is why we have to work extremely hard to have those relationships. Because Faith, you and I've talked about this before. If you have a relationship, you have influence. Period. If you have a broken relationship, You don't have the same level of influence. You always have influence. But the world tries to tell you, oh, you know what? Your kids aren't listening to you. They're teenagers now. Just let them do their own thing. No, I would not let my kid go play in the street, on the highway. I'd say, get out of the street. I'd go get them and, put them in my car and get them out of the street so they don't get killed, so they don't get hit, so they don't get themselves in trouble. We do have that element of protection for our children, because a child left to themselves can bring forth destruction. We can't keep them from making foolish decisions. But when we go for the relationship, because our children know that we hear what they understand, our desire is to listen and understand and grow, that we're willing to adjust and change as they grow and mature. With freedom comes responsibility. With responsibility comes more freedom. When they can handle it, they get more. It's not like we're saying, no, we just don't want you to ever do anything. No, we actually want you to grow up. We want you to leave our house. We want you to step into society and fulfill the role that God has for you. But we want you to do this as intact as possible, with as minimal damage, with as minimal mistakes as possible. That doesn't mean they're not going to have any. Some children aren't going to have a lot because they're cautious. They're not about to do anything risky. But you have other children that risk. That's like their middle name. I laugh at the face of danger, and you're like, oh no, that's not wise. But there again, it goes back to knowing your child. So, Faith, when we think about what's going on with our kids, our kids are keenly aware of cancel culture. Our kids are keenly aware that what they say and do can be used against them for the rest of their life. However, because they're still developing brains, as you know, they're not always thinking logically. They're not always thinking of the consequence. Sometimes they get caught up in the moment of the fun or the moment of whatever it is, and there isn't any logic. And unfortunately, our society right now, kids aren't really allowed to make any kind of mistake at all, say any word that could be misconstrued in any possible way according to whatever the whim is of that day. And that strikes fear in our kids. The isolation, when you were talking about COVID, isolation has done a great deal of emotional trauma. Faith, I was speaking at a leadership conference this weekend for homeschool leaders. I'd say there's like 175 leaders from all over the state of Florida in there. And I just shared with them something that's a new diagnosis. It's called PTSE. And if you want to write that in the chat, it's PTSE. It's pandemic, trauma, stress, experience. It's real. Kids 11 to 17 years old, especially boys, are considering the idea of suicide. At 50% have thought about suicide at 11 to 17 years old. There's so much research out right now how this isolation, being cut off from the world, this fear that has been struck, whether it's fear of getting sick or whether it's fear of getting canceled or whether it's fear of not having a future, it's all weighing on them. And now, Faith, more than ever, we need to be having these conversations with our kids about navigating uncertain times. And the wisdom of a wise man is even a fool is thought wise when they hold their tongue. So be slow to speak, be quick to hear, be attentive to what's going on around you. Be very mindful of the people that you are surrounding yourself with. All of those are so key right now, Faith.
Yeah, our children are facing so many things. I mean, we all are. And I've said to a lot of my friends, it's like there's a spirit of fear, and I don't want to parent out of fear. There is a lot of fear in the world and so much going on. The conversations, the relationship is so critical, and the mental health. And with home education, I feel personally that those things really have to take precedence, because if we don't feel safe, if our kids don't feel safe, if they don't have relationships, the brain literally shuts off. It goes to fear, flight, fight when we don't feel safe. The amygdala shuts down. So learning can't occur.
Right.
And so parents really need to be tuned in to their kids. This traumatic stress that you referred to, the pandemic, is real mental health issues. We have seen a huge spike in suicides, and we can't think that as homeschooling families that we're immune to the problems of the culture. Sometimes we think, well, we're homeschooling and we're doing this and I'm following I'm doing the rules, check, I'm doing all these good things. And then what do you say to the parent that like me said, well, we homeschooled and we did youth group and our kids were in church and I'm trying to listen and I'm trying to do this. And then they do have a broken relationship or something happens and there is trauma. And what do you say to these parents that I know are out there listening, that their hearts are broken, they have broken relationships, they want to rebuild, they've lost their kids' heart or the influence possibly for a season, or they're just in a really hard season, maybe it's a mental health. Can you, besides praying, what are some other practical tips and ideas that you can share, Connie?
You can't quit. There's this tendency to just throw up your hands and say, okay, I quit. I'm done. You know what? You're going to go that direction. You're just going to face it. And, that's just the way it is going to be. No, you can't quit. You can't quit on them. You have to remain steadfast. Now, Faith, I love your transparency about the struggles you've had. And I write a lot about those in my book. But those struggles, they do actually refine you and I as women. And they force us into a place that maybe we weren't willing to go. We just thought we read all the books. We read all the books and we listened to all the speakers and we tried to be careful who our kids hung around. And then something crept in, or maybe our child crept out. Or maybe, their desire was for something different than what you were trying to build. I remember this woman one time, I called her just to chat with her and I said, hey, how's it going? I haven't seen you, around or whatever. And she goes, I actually quit what I was doing. And I quit my job. She was working at something. And I said, you did? Why? You were really good at it. And she said, because I was losing my child's heart. I'm like, good reason to quit? What's going on? And she shared with me that she had just gotten so busy with other things that her daughter had started talking to other people and not talking to her and wasn't listening to her. And so she walked away from all that she was doing to be able to focus on rebuilding that relationship. So what do I say? Does that mean you have to walk away from everything? No, but there have been many times I have walked away from everything, because at the end of the day, Faith, when we turn the tassel, and this is all about what parenting beyond the rule is. Your rules are good, limits are good, boundaries are good, but they have to change as your child grows up. But at the end, I want parents to know that they are trying to help their children understand we're building relationships for life. We're going to be doing life together, not just like right now. And we're hitting some pitfalls, but they can get weary. They can get tired. They can get frustrated. They have to monitor their mouth. They have to talk to maybe a friend. You and I have talked at length over times, because we have to have some people that we trust with our emotions and feelings, but they also have to be people that we can trust, that aren't going to spread information about our children, or they're not going to think negatively about our children and now label them for the rest of their lives. Oh, well, you know what? Let's shine that spotlight on your life, and then maybe we can talk. But I clearly remember that we are not supposed to be throwing stones at a glass house. So we have to have those people that we can trust to help us process with, that we can cry with, that we can pray with, that will exhort us, challenge us. You know what? You're a great mom, but you may want to back off in this area. You may want to try this approach. Those are people you trust. It's a sacred place for a mom to share those kind of feelings and emotions, because we're raw. We've given it our all. The other thing is, Give your children some leeway. I know that's going to be hard, but give them some leeway and remind them, I know exactly. I know that you know what we believe, what God's word says, how your dad and I have taught and trained you. We know that. And I can see that you're really wrestling with that. I want you to remember something. We're going to give you some freedom here. We're going to let you try this. We're going to let you talk to this. We're going to let you do such and such. And if we see some adverse reactions, if our relationship starts to suffer, we're going to have to not rein them back in. We're going to have to make some adjustments. Because at the end of the day, sweetie, all these friends that are there that are so important, or even what you want to do that's so important, maybe it's get a nose piercing or a tattoo or hang out with this group of friends or go a weekend away with somebody. We have to be able to speak to their why. Why do they want it? What kind of connection are they looking for? What kind of statement are they trying to make? What story are they writing? If they know that we understand them, Faith, if they know that we are trying to understand where they're coming from, and then we invite them to consider, those are key words. I would say type that in the chat. When your conversation happens, invite them to consider what you have to say. Do you hear the subtlety of faith? Faith, you and I talked about that. There comes a point where we cannot make our children do what we think we can make them do. We can make them be home at a curfew time, but the minute there's an opportunity to find a loophole, they're finding it. What we're going after, Faith, is the heart. We're going after a relationship. We have to remember, when I was telling you about them, they already know what our response is going to be to lying, to stealing, to cheating, to hanging out with people, to doing drugs, to drinking, to certain attire, to, certain inappropriate things on social media. They already know what we have to say about that. That's why they do it behind our back, because they want to do it whether you care or not. And I'm saying, let's get them to a point where they do care about what you have to say. And so that's where the listening, that's where they're being careful with your mouth. That's where you say, sweetie, I can tell you really want to do this. I'm just going to invite you to consider something. Should you continue to do this, this could possibly test the rest of, possibly cost you a scholarship. This could possibly cost you a job. This could possibly cost you whatever it is, damage that you don't even see. Because, sweetie, we don't know the plans God has for you. And we don't know how you're going to get there. You may zig and you may zag. We would love for you to kind of zig and zag like this. But if you got to go this way, okay, your kids need to know that you love them unconditionally, without exception.
That's really good. Absolutely. And I love that you give us the language to use to how to navigate these teen years and the relationship.
I think I shared with you, Faith, those, I have a couple parenting hacks. I know you may have seen me hold these up. I have these PDFs that came from the book. There's like 5 of them. Faith is going to post them in. You can download those. Those are parenting hacks. And then I also have a little ebook called 5 Fears Every Parent of Teen Faces. And basically how to overcome those 5 fears. Like you said, Faith, we can't parent from a place of fear. We have to squash that fear, and knowing that God is in control, that if your child makes some decisions, that you're going to walk with them through it. You wish they wouldn't do it. Oh man, we wish they wouldn't do some of the things that they do, but they do. And then we have to be there to help them see that, as the book shows, and I'll close with this because I know it's time. Your child is a masterpiece. They're original. They're one of a kind. It takes different colors, different types of paintbrushes, different palettes, but God is the architect. He knows the plans he has for your child, and he has given them to you to teach and train in the way they should go. Sometimes our kids take a while to come back. Sometimes they don't, and you don't know that. But what God is asking you and I, Faith, is that we just keep showing up every day, that we're faithful, that we're not basing all of our decisions on fears of what our friends might think or fear of what our kids might do, but that we know that God uses everything and that there is nothing wasted. And that's why we have to remember our kids are a masterpiece, each one of our children.
Amen. Yes, they are. And some of them like to paint outside of the lines.
Most of them want to paint outside the lines, especially
right.
your risk takers. What lines? Why are those on the paper?
Exactly. Well, I tell you, we could talk for so long about this topic, but Connie, I just thank you so much for your wisdom, for sharing your life, your story, that God continues to use everything that you go through. He uses everything that we go through, I believe, for his glory, for good, right? For those of us that love him, that know him, right? So thank you so much for sharing today from your experience. This conversation has been encouraging for me, and I'm hoping that it's been encouraging for those who've been watching as well. If you would like to find Connie online, and I know you do, you should. You can find her on social media at Connie Albers, or through her website, conniealbers.com. We're posting those in the chat. Connie also has a podcast. It's called Equipped to Be, and I would really encourage you to tap into that as well. So here at HSLDA, I do want to tell you that we recognize the importance of healthy parenting and how it goes hand in hand with homeschooling. And we do have many resources for you to help equip parents in their homeschooling and parenting. We'll post a couple in the comments. We have 6 ways to motivate your teen. There's a post on 7 rungs on the ladder to independence. They have the resources there that Connie has shared with us. Please know that HSLDA members have access to our team of educational consultants to help you get your questions answered or to tackle challenges that you might be facing, like motivating your teen or reluctant learners, incorporating their interest into your homeschool curricula, and helping to nurture their independence, and so much more. Our high school consultants particularly are awesome. So if you're not a member, we'd love for you to join us. You can check it out at hslda.org/join. Thank you so much for Connie Albers joining us today. Be sure to check out her book, Parenting Beyond the Rules. I love you, Connie. You're such a great mentor and such a great encourager. Thanks for jumping on with me today.
Absolutely. I love you too. And I love all that HSLDA does to support homeschool families in their journey. So thanks it was an honor for me to be with you.
Bye, everyone.